Nintendo games on Atari consoles isn't something that's unheard of. The 2600, ColecoVision, and even Intellivision were home to some of Nintendo's early successful arcade games. And it made sense because at that point, Nintendo, well, they weren't a home gaming company. So it only made sense to bring their titles home to the consoles of the time. But when the Atari 7800 was finally released, after its tumultuous struggle getting onto the market, Nintendo had already brought out the Famicom and brought the NES out to the United States. And this is why some people find it so surprising that games such as Donkey Kong, Donkey Kong Jr., and the original Mario Brothers found their way onto the Atari 7800. This was thanks to some pre-existing agreements that were still valid at that point. And it had a side effect of making kids such as myself daydream about seeing Super Mario Brothers and Zelda on our Atari 7800. Of course that would never actually happen, but it did help Atari a lot more than I think some people realize today. So let's take a look at the two Donkey Kong games on the Atari 7800, along with the incredible arcade port that was released pretty recently. So let's get into it. The Donkey Kong arcade game was released in 1981 and had a storied history from there. It became a massive international success that put Nintendo on the map. It was ported to every early console that was relevant at the time. It even became the pack-in game with the ColecoVision. All that's to say that Donkey Kong was a success and a big deal. But by 1988, Donkey Kong was starting to show its age. Like, by a lot. There had been sequels at this point, and Donkey Kong's co-star had reached levels of fame that nobody would have believed in 1981. So of course, Donkey Kong and its successful sequel, Donkey Kong Jr., needed an Atari 7800 release at this time. Because the Atari 7800 is the console that not only embodied arcade games, but also embodied the idea of too little too late. And this is coming from somebody who absolutely loves the Atari 7800. But let's be honest, the library of games, well, it didn't set the industry on fire. But again, it was thanks to previous contractual agreements between Nintendo and Atari that Atari was able to release these three Nintendo games on the system. And honestly, these were three big releases for the time. As a kid, and even as an adult, I've gotten many hours of enjoyment from the Donkey Kong games on the 7800. They were all programmed well, and I honestly feel they are closely related to the NES versions. Not exact ports, mind you, but they share some kind of DNA in my opinion. In the first game, being Donkey Kong, you take control of Mario, a stumpy little man who is attempting to rescue his love, Pauline, from his rampaging pet, Donkey Kong. DK has broken out of his cage and is seeking revenge against his previous owner, and this leads Mario across several dangerous levels to rescue Pauline. You'll encounter 3 different screens in Donkey Kong on the 7800, and they'll repeat over and over again, which was the normal for a long time. Now in the arcade there was 4 screens, but for whatever reason, early ports of the game all dropped the factory level, and I honestly don't know why. So what you're left with is the girder level, the spring level, and the rivet level. But even so, the game flows just fine, and if you've never played the arcade original, you would scarcely realize that anything was missing at all. The 7800 version of Donkey Kong has its quirks, however. Well, that's made it a decisive game for fans of the console. Some people love Donkey Kong and cite it as one of the good titles for the Atari 7800. Others find the controls to be too finicky and the sounds to be the absolute worst. Me? Well, I sit somewhere in the middle. I was lucky enough to have both the NES and 7800 growing up. And we had this version of Donkey Kong and the Donkey Kong Classics for the NES. Now, I think that climbing ladders, especially with the Pro lines, is a bit difficult on the Atari. Much more so than it should have been. And for some reason, I have a hard time getting the timing down at the top of the second level with the spring. This spring has been the bane of my existence for almost my whole life. But beyond that, I personally don't find the sound on the 7800 version to be all that bad. It's bad, don't get me wrong. But when you get into the game and start progressing, well, I tend not to notice it as much as you would think. We could go on and on reviewing Donkey Kong for the 7800, but I want to move on to a sequel and improvement. If I had to give a grade for Donkey Kong on the Pro system, I would give it a solid 3 Pro Lines out of 5. It's fun to play and a good-looking port of the arcade classic, but you'll have to get past a few flaws to fully enjoy it. But, well, as for me growing up, nothing was as good as the sequel, Donkey Kong Jr. Donkey Kong Jr. was my favorite of the duo growing up. I don't know if I found it more approachable, if I identified with the son rescuing the father, or if I simply liked playing the ape better. But whatever it was, I definitely put more time and effort into playing Donkey Kong Jr. And this 7800 version came out at the same exact time as its prequel on the console, and it's pretty much exactly the same in terms of quality. It's a solid playing game with some minor control hiccups that sort of hinder it when using the Pro-Line controller, and the sound is awful. Now personally, I can bear with the sound because, well, I always have, but I can be honest in the sense that it absolutely sucks. All the arcade levels are present in DK Jr., so you have the complete set of 4 screens, where Donkey Kong just had the 3. And while I can progress further into this one than the original, even today, I feel that overall, this game is just a bit less fun. Yep, that's right, I completely flopped from when I was a child, and actually prefer the original now. The first stage is fantastic, and a great way to introduce the new vine climbing mechanics. You'll learn that grabbing a single vine is slow when going upward, but very fast when you need to slide down. And the best way to go upward is to grab 2 vines at once. You progress through the 4 levels, rescue your papa, and then the screens flip and you do it over and over again, just like the original. As I said earlier, I found Donkey Kong Jr. easier to get the hang of, and I made it much further when grabbing footage for this video. But outside of the audio, well, there are some flaws that made Donkey Kong Jr. a bit too old school for some people. I didn't mention it when talking about the original, but these games have fall damage. So if you miss a jump and safely land on a platform below, well, you're still dead. It feels cheap, but it wasn't strange for the time. There's some other oddities in this game, but nothing you can't overcome with some practice and just getting to know the game's quirks. I think where DK Jr. really succeeds is that the game avoids the pitfalls of so many other sequels for its time, and the pitfalls of sequels from today, honestly. Donkey Kong Jr. is not just a continuation of the original, with slightly harder levels. It's a whole new game. It has new mechanics and challenges, yet everything is tied together beautifully with the characters and content. You can already see here that Nintendo has a gameplay-first mentality, and it's served them well over the years. They could have gone the minor 2049er Bounty Bob route, but they didn't, and I love these games because of that. Donkey Kong Jr., much like its papa, is a solid 3 Pro Lines out of 5. It's completely different, but familiar, and it has quirks and flaws, but overall it's an enjoyable package and great to have on the Pro system. I was completely happy to have these 2 games. I held them in high regard personally. That is until another game came along in the mid-2010s and changed everything we knew about Donkey Kong on the Atari 7800. Donkey Kong PK and XM, a feat of programming on the console. This was an incredible treat for us Atari 7800 fans, and I honestly don't know what we did to get so lucky in having such talented programmers bring this cool stuff to our console. It was programmed by TEP392 and released in 2014. He's been releasing it in short bursts and offered them on the Atari Age forums, although it appears that he's no longer offering it at all. Still, it was available for many years on the forums, and he sold it at an extremely fair price. Donkey Kong PK utilizes the enhanced Poke Audio chip that was available in games like Ball Blazer and Commando, but there was also an XM version that was going to use the XM expansion module. We'll talk about that more in a different video, but all you need to know is that both versions are nearly arcade-perfect ports of the classic Donkey Kong we all know and love. Right from the start, this game greets you with the iconic flashing Donkey Kong screen and drops us into an incredible options menu. You can play 1 or 2 players, follow the US or Japanese screen order, choose what level to start on, and even change the difficulty between arcade accurate or something more in line with console ports of the time. and once you start the game proper, you're treated to all the right screens, the enhanced arcade quality graphics, and beautiful, gorgeous sound that the 7800 so desperately needed. Donkey Kong PK is right up there with titles such as Baby Pac-Man, Ricky and Vicky, and EXO in being some of the best available for the console. Now the question is Donkey Kong PK perfect? And the answer is yes. Yes, it is. Well, actually, I guess it depends on your definition of perfect. As far as adhering to the arcade that it was ported from, I'd say that nobody could have gotten it closer. The difference in novice and arcade difficulty is night and day, and really shows how the arcades were meant to gobble up your quarters. No laundry for you, my friend. But Donkey Kong PK has a few issues inherent to the game itself. No matter what controller I use, I get hung up on the ladders from time to time. I don't know if this is because I'm not fully climbing before pushing left or right, but sometimes I get stuck at the top of the ladder and ultimately get killed. But I do this in every version of the game. Outside of quirks like this, the game has no real flaws that I can think of. I mean, come on, it brings the infamous pie level back into the home game. The frickin' pie level, guys. Before playing Donkey Kong PK, I had never experienced this level before. I just never played the game in the arcades, and my experience was limited to the 2600, 7800, and NES. So I was just thrilled to finally experience it. And all I can say is that, well, I understand why they dropped it. It's so different from the rest of the levels, not just in gameplay, but in color and feel. But it's a fine level on its own. Maybe a bit too easy. By far, I find the spring level to be the most trauma-inducing for myself. I don't know why, but I always tense up when playing this one. And I probably shouldn't, because I didn't die a single time on it while gathering this footage. All my deaths came from the first and last screens. But man, those springs and that eerie silence, it just puts me on edge. TEP392 really gave us something incredible with Donkey Kong PK. The 7800 is really known as the arcade console for a lot of us, with excellent ports of arcade classics like Food Fight, Miss Pac-Man, Dig Dug, and Joust from its retail years, all the way to the homebrew releases of Galaxian, Popeye, Frogger, and Cubert. It's the console that brings the arcade home, and Donkey Kong PK is the shining holy grail of this idea. So I couldn't bring myself to give this game anything less than 5 Proline controllers out of 5. It's an awesome game, and something that I really think all Atari 7800 owners should experience. And if you do stumble across the cartridge, it's 7800 Plus compatible, as is all the DK games we covered here. There are flaws, but the flaws are inherent to the arcade game itself, and some would even call these flaws simple quirks. So if you can grab this game at a fair price, or are able to download it and run it off an emulator, well, please do so. You won't be disappointed. But you've all heard what I have to say about Donkey Kong games on the Atari 7800. So now, I want to hear from all of you. Which of these games are your favorite? Are they good? Did you own and play them back in the day? And should I cover Mario Brothers next? Let me know the answers to these questions and whatever else you want to say in the comments down below. And please, leave a like if you enjoyed this video, a dislike if you hate puppies, and subscribe for more content just like this one. I cover all things Atari, usually on stuff from their past, but we do stuff from today time to time too. You might enjoy these videos that I previously did on Atari. Check them out. Okay, let's wrap up this video before my pet ape breaks out and kidnaps my sweet Pauline. I've been the 7800 Pro Gamer, a man who thinks that nothing can go wrong in keeping apes as pets, right here in the Atari network. And I'd like to thank you all for watching. And as always, remember to stay classy, Atarians.